Hello, and thank you for joining us today to learn a little bit more about how to secure SharePoint. My name is Uri Lichtenfeld, and I'm a product manager with Microsoft, and our session today is titled Security for SharePoint, What's Not in the Box. So let's take a quick look at what we need to secure within SharePoint. Whenever we have a SharePoint organization within our enterprise, we're concerned about a variety of things, whether it's a virus, malware, or inappropriate content, whether it's how to publish SharePoint externally and afford access to remote users, employees, and partners on the outside world, whether it's how we can adapt and create a policy and force that policy for remote access so that we can control who can do what within SharePoint and also from where, whether it's protecting the actual information when it's in storage, so information leakage prevention by ensuring that that content is encrypted and controlled, and whether it's managing the rights and permissions of access to SharePoint and provisioning the users and those rights and permissions to SharePoint. So the quick way to think about this is really the 5 Ps: protection, publishing, policy, prevention, and provision. And for each of those 5 Ps, we actually have a solution in place. So on the protection side, we offer forefront security for SharePoint. On the publishing side, we introduce Internet Security and Acceleration Server, known as ISA. On the policy side, to add on top of publishing, we have IAG, which is the Intelligent Application Gateway. On the prevention side, we introduce the Windows RMS, or Rights Management Services. And on the provision side, of course, ILM, the Identity Lifecycle Manager. Now, we'll walk through each of these solutions to understand a little bit better how they play together to provide a complete security story for SharePoint. So let's discuss protection just a little bit. Protection effectively through forefront security for SharePoint is the ability to actually control the content that lives on SharePoint, to filter it for viruses, for malware, and for potential keywords and or file extension or data types. Forefront Security for SharePoint is an engine that sits on top of the SharePoint server, managed centrally through a central console that allows you to create a policy for virus checking of the files, for content filtering within the files, and of course for verifying malware and any other type of inappropriate content that might be uploaded to SharePoint. One of the unique capabilities of Forefront Security for SharePoint is the fact that it optimizes its performance by using multiple engines. By this, Forefront Security for SharePoint actually introduces more than one antivirus engine that runs at the same time and scans the files. This really ensures that you have the quickest response time to protect content from viruses and or from malware, and that you're at the cutting edge of being able to control what's being uploaded and what's being stored on your SharePoint server. When we move beyond protection, we look to publishing and policy. Now remember, on the publishing side, we offer ISA server, the Internet Security and Acceleration Server. Now, ISA is a great way to start when you're looking to publish access remotely to SharePoint. It provides you the first sort of key things that you're looking at, whether it's pre-authenticating the users by making sure that you can now authenticate them on the ISA server as opposed to directly on SharePoint, whether it's the ability to overlay a variety of multi-factor authentications, or whether it's the ability to provide a limited single sign-on into SharePoint. ISA is a full-fledged firewall, so it helps you create that defense in-depth topology, and it also provides full HTTP protocol inspection. And of course, it's also a platform for load balancing, for network load balancing. And when you're looking at publishing, ISA is definitely the great way to start in order to allow access to SharePoint from the outside world. But when you extend further beyond publishing, you're going to ask yourself questions about policy and how you can control who can really do what within SharePoint. And that's where IAG comes into the mix, the Intelligent Application Gateway. Now, IAG includes ISA, so it provides you the publishing capabilities as well as the policy. And what IAG basically delivers is a single portal to control all access. Typically, a user would start off by putting in a URL of their company, remote.company.com for instance, and they'll hit a login page. Now, at that stage, you have the ability to push an endpoint assessment down to the user. What this means is that the machine that the user is coming in from is going to get scanned to verify whether they're running the latest patches, whether they're running an updated personal firewall or an updated antivirus, and of course, which form of personal firewall antivirus are they running? Are they running a local desktop search? Any of these types of components. All that information that's collected about the user can later be used by IAG to enforce a policy. So if, for instance, the user is completely coming from an unmanaged environment, no antivirus, no personal firewall, you might even choose not to allow them to authenticate. Assuming you're going to allow the user to authenticate, the next phase for the user is to provide their credentials. IAG knows how to overlay virtually any method of authentication, whether it's Active Directory or any form of strong authentication on top of that. Once the user is now authenticated, you know 2 things about them. You know who they are, and of course what groups and memberships they have and what rights they have within the org, but you also know where they're coming from, what's currently happening on their PC. And from there on in, IAG can control the access in a very granular way to SharePoint as well as to other applications. So for every transaction that a user tries to generate, IAG can make a determination whether or not to allow that transaction for that user, but also, no less importantly, for that user from that location. So for instance, you might determine that you're going to provide access to SharePoint, but you're going to block the ability to upload files from a machine that's not running an updated antivirus. Conversely, you might determine that you'll publish access to SharePoint, but you might block the ability to download files since you can't be sure that that content is going to get removed. Now, the other ability that you have is you can say a user can still come in, can update and can upload and download files, but you're going to block the ability to access the administrative URLs from SharePoint because they're not coming in from a managed corporate issued asset or laptop. So IAG has the ability to really sort of bring together the understanding of who the user is, what's currently happening on the application, as well as what the specific transaction that the user is trying to generate. Now, at the end of this session, once the user is done accessing SharePoint or whatever other application you're publishing, IAG can go through a cleanup whereby it removes from the client machine any of the content that was downloaded during that session. You could also set up a policy that says if the cleanup cannot enact itself, you're going to block the ability to download content to begin with. So you'll still allow the ability to access SharePoint, but you'll block the downloads of applications. So consider IAG really a one-stop shop for publishing and controlling access for SharePoint. And wrapped onto all of that is a centralized logging and monitoring that lets you control who did what within SharePoint and from where, what was currently happening on their PC at the time. So when we look forward from that, in the realm of policy, IAG basically helps you simplify your management, your ongoing management for SharePoint, by basically providing a bunch of wizard-driven configuration as well as centralized policies. IAG helps you enhance the security for SharePoint because you're now assessing not just who the user is, but also where they're coming in from, and you have the ability to very granularly step into which transaction you're allowing and not allowing. And IAG also helps add some functionality into SharePoint by enhancing the single sign-on capabilities, integrating multi-factor authentication, and no less important, incorporating a whole variety of SSL VPN functionality so that you can now publish additional applications through SharePoint. And at the end of the day, IAG really talks about improving the productivity. So more users can do more within SharePoint from more locations without necessarily requiring any client software or any sort of additional software to be installed. So when we look forward from policy and into the next two P's that we have prevention and provision. So on the prevention side, we have Windows RMS, the Rights Management Services. And RMS effectively helps you protect your data in storage. It helps you control the data usage. And it really provides you with an extensible platform to create controls over your data, whether they're stored on SharePoint or stored on file servers or transferred through email. What RMS effectively does is it encrypts the actual content that sits on SharePoint or sits on your file server and includes within that encryption the usage policy for each and every one of the users. So when I create a file and I decide to apply RMS rights to it, or the server decides to apply RMS rights automatically, I now have the ability to say who can read this file, who can distribute this file, who can print and copy paste from this file, and from there on in those rights live within that file. And using RMS on SharePoint ensures that that content is protected not just when it sits on your SharePoint server, but also when users download it from the SharePoint server and later on carry that information with them. So it really just helps complete that story. On the provision side, we introduce ILM, the Identity Lifecycle Manager. ILM talks about the ability to auto-provision users and auto-provision rights and manage the associations of users into rights. It also affords a user a self-help kiosk to manage their identity and manage the renegotiation of their password or the resetting of their PIN or their token. And it really helps you synchronize the identity data across your organization, not just within SharePoint, but also within other resources and other applications. Now, when you look at SharePoint, you look at the scenarios for ILM and for SharePoint, there's the ability to now manage groups amongst the actual SharePoint sites, and the ability to now move information from one group in one SharePoint site to another group or to another SharePoint site. Of course, you also now have the ability to synchronize your SharePoint groups with your Active Directory groups and to provide an overall much easier story in how you're provisioning rights and associating who can do what within your SharePoint sites. So remember, when we're looking at securing SharePoint, we really talk about the 5 Ps. They are protection, publishing, policy, prevention, and provision, with each and every one of these solutions. And please do come back to our site at www.microsoft.com/forefront to learn more about these products. Thanks.